Hello and welcome to Talk Truth. My name is Corey Huntsberger. I've got my father, Alan Huntsberger, in the studio. Dad, how are you doing today? You still walking that 6 kilometers like you do every morning?
I did, and one of the guys I walked the trail with yesterday said that the bears are out now.
Oh, nice. Did you see any?
No, but I read an article that an angler, a guy was fishing on the lake, and he down in southern Alberta, and he got attacked by a bear. He came out of it okay, but yeah.
All right. Well, I'm excited about our guest. Let's get him on right now. His name is Franco Terrazzano. He's the federal director of the Canadian Taxpayers Federation. We've had him before, and he's back. Franco, welcome back to the show.
Hey, gentlemen. Thanks for having me on. My pleasure.
Well, thanks for being here. I'm going to start off this show. I know there's lots of different topics we're going to get into, but I have to talk about this. I'm sorry. I have to talk about Axing the Tax, the rise and fall of Canada's carbon tax. This is Franco's first book. Franco, I cannot tell you how much I enjoyed this book. I think this is one of the greatest pieces of Canadian literature ever, because, and I'm going to tell you why. I know that's a big statement. You did an incredible investigating journalistic type approach in chasing this whole carbon tax down. And you brought in a picture. This is the most important part of the book, of how things work behind closed doors. And it blew me away. I mean, we've got politicians making promises that they don't keep. We got politicians that are not telling us what they're going to run on. They win and they slip in more taxes. The people don't want this stuff, and it doesn't matter. They continue to shove it down our throats. It is incredible, and I'm just so grateful you wrote this book, and I think everyone needs to pick it up. I'm sorry. That's just my opinion.
Well, that means a lot. Like, I really appreciate it. And like you said, this was my first book. I wasn't even really planning on ever writing a book. But then as the fight against the carbon tax looked like the people were actually going to win, I said, you know what? We better tell the story, the real history of the carbon tax, the fact that it always had these fundamental flaws that destined it to the dustbin of history. Because we saw as the carbon tax was faltering in the polls, where Canadians were just so against it, we were worried that the carbon taxers would come out and say, oh, well, the carbon tax was a good idea. Trudeau just bungled the policy, or Trudeau just didn't communicate it well enough. And the truth is so far from that type of spin, right? The reality is that the carbon tax, it was always a bad deal for ordinary Canadians. The carbon tax, regardless of what politicians call it, will make your life more expensive, and it won't work, right? So we knew we had to write the real history of the carbon tax, why it was always a flawed policy, and why all Canadians should really be against the carbon tax, right? And I'll say two more things. The book also foreshadows what to look out for, as the fight against carbon taxes continue, as the fight against, overly regulatory energy red tape or environmental red tape continues to be fought. And here's the first thing, right? Politicians are going to try to relabel and hide carbon taxes, right? They're not going to directly impose a carbon tax in the way that everyone saw, like the Trudeau government did. And we can already see, this happening with the new Carney government, where the Carney government has a hidden carbon tax that it buried in fuel regulations. The Carney government is also imposing a hidden carbon tax on Canadian businesses, right? So we already know that the carbon taxers, the politicians, are trying to relabel, repackage, and hide carbon taxes on Canadians. Now, the other point I wanted to bring up is, look, the carbon tax is essentially democracy gone wrong, right? It was all the worst elements of what can happen in a democratic society, where you essentially had these political elites, right, who get paid a ton of money by the taxpayer, who get a bunch of their expenses covered, right? Like when they fly to these international conferences, burning through taxpayer dollars and jet fuel. Then you also had many of the elites in the media, many of the taxpayer-funded academics. You even had big business, right? All forgetting about the ordinary Canadians who carbon taxes really punish. And you had this entire group of the elite class essentially forcing carbon taxes down on Canadians. So that's just a little bit of a taste of why I wanted to write this book.
Well, and it's not just one party, it's all the parties, even the conservatives. I mean, you in this book, you talk about how you guys have them like sign a pledge that they're not going to like bring in a carbon tax. We've got the conservatives signing the pledge, and then the conservative gets in and he totally lies. He totally flip-flops and brings it in anyway. Like the book really shows there's no integrity at all. Whatever they say, you can't trust. Whatever they're not saying, you can't trust. It really is a great book. I just want to emphasize that people really need to get this, because one of the things we try to do here at Talk Truth is to help people understand how the government works. Right now, we've got people that are voting conservative because grandpa voted conservative, my papa voted conservative, I'm voting conservative, and they do it without thinking. And that's okay. I'm not saying don't vote conservative. I'm saying understand the man. Who are you voting for? Where do they stand? And even though they sign a pledge, that the pledge is amazing. Great idea, by the way. It doesn't matter. They'll flip-flop anyway and treat us like scum. My question to you is, why does this keep happening? Because over and over and over again, Canadians don't want it. They keep saying they don't want it. And they're voting, by the time it gets to a heated place, they'll vote the people out that are bringing it in. You know what I mean? And who is behind the curtain? Why are they pushing this? It doesn't matter what party they're in. Why do they keep picking this up and bringing it forward to the Canadian people when it's a terrible deal?
Okay, so there's a lot to unpack there. So if I don't answer one part of your question, just let me know and I'll do my best to get back to it.
It's a lot. I'm sorry.
So number one is that you're right, is that this was not a total partisan issue in the sense that you even had conservatives who are running on carbon taxes, right? The former Conservative Party leader, Aaron O'Toole, yeah, he signed his name right by the Canadian Taxpayers Federation's pledge, and it was very clear, all right? He promised Canadians that he would not bring in any form of carbon tax, right? That he would scrap the Trudeau Liberals carbon tax, then he wouldn't bring in any form of carbon tax. And then what does he do just months before the 2021 election? He flip-flopped. Mm-hmm. He announced his own carbon tax. And it was like this weird O'Toole bucks kind of rebatey scheme that might have been even worse than Trudeau's carbon tax, right? So we hammered him. We hammered him. He broke his promise, and then he wanted to run on a type of carbon tax that was awful, and so we held him accountable for it. And O'Toole's problem is that Canadians aren't stupid. Right? Canadians could see what he was doing. Canadians understood that he was a flip-flopper on one issue. So what else was he going to flip-flop on? And, O'Toole was held accountable first by Canadians and then by his own Conservative Party. If I can just give some credit, because, we'll call balls and strikes here for taxpayers. There have been a couple good politicians on carbon taxes from day one. I'm thinking of Brad Wall, right? The former premier of Saskatchewan. If you go back about 10 years ago, there's really only two organizations in Canada really fighting carbon taxes. And that was one, the Canadian Taxpayers Federation, and two, the Saskatchewan government under Brad Wall. I will say now, in modern day, we do have to give credit to Mr. Pierre Poilievre, who's the now leader of the Conservative Party. I think he has made the case against carbon taxes exceptionally well, and he's held the government accountable on all carbon taxes, right? He's on record saying, get rid of all carbon taxes, not just the consumer carbon tax, but also the hidden carbon tax through fuel regulations, plus that carbon tax on Canadian businesses as well. So I do think Poilievre deserves credit. Now, you ask me, who is this behind the scenes, right? Who's pulling the strings? I'm going to give you an answer that's actually a little bit more scary, is that it's not just one person, right? It's not just one person. And it would be much better if it was just one person, then you could at least find one person to try to hold accountable. But as I kind of mentioned in my first answer, right, you actually saw a group of the elite class more broadly, where you had some of the big business leaders, even in Alberta, pushing carbon taxes, right? You had many of the media elites, especially in the traditional legacy media, pushing carbon taxes, right? You had the taxpayer-funded academics in the universities massively pushing carbon taxes, right? Essentially running an air war for the government to impose carbon taxes on the citizens. And then you obviously had the political elite who wanted to run on carbon taxes, or not run on carbon taxes, but to at least impose them on Canadians. And of course, you had the government bureaucracy who also support the carbon tax so that they could hire more bureaucrats to administer the carbon tax, right? So as I kind of mentioned, it wasn't just one person pushing this. You essentially had the entire class of political elites from many of these different groups that forgot about the ordinary Canadians and were punishing us with this type of tax.
Yeah, it's powerful. I encourage everyone to grab this book, Axing the Tax. You did an amazing job. I'm sure your parents are proud. You killed it. I hope you continue to write because on other topics as well, because Canadians don't see this. It's like how you covered history and all the different provinces too. You know, you covered everything from Quebec to British Columbia and everything going on. It's amazing. You know, obviously there's a massive map or a big plan out there that they're all following that we know nothing about. We just sit here and we argue back and forth between one another and we suffer. The people suffer. And you did a really good job exposing it. So,
hey, can I add one more thing? Because, and I meant to get to this, but so to build on the idea that it's not just this one person, it's actually a broader class of the elite, whether that's in business, whether that's in media, whether that's in academia, politicians, or even government bureaucrats, right? But there's another aspect here that I think carbon taxes really shine a light on, and that's this aspect of control, right? Because what is a carbon tax? A carbon tax essentially is this: do what we say or pay, right? It's this idea that certain elites should have the right to dictate how the ordinary citizenry should live their lives, right? You want to drive a big pickup truck, right? You want to work in a shop, right? You want to have your own farm? Well, then you better pay up, because all that stuff relies on either gasoline, diesel, propane, or natural gas. So there's also this control element behind this, right? It's not just a money grab, which it was. There's also this control element, right? Either you do what we say, live the type of life we think you should, or you pay up. And what is, and you know, what do all of these elites have in common, whether it's the, you know, academics, or, you know, certain executives in the business community, or politicians or bureaucrats? Guess what? Clamoring for carbon taxes doesn't require, in your condo, doesn't require a lot of gasoline or propane or natural gas, right? But driving your pickup truck to work, working in a shop, or you know, growing food on the farm, all of that does require a lot of those types of fuels, right? So the people clamoring for carbon taxes, they weren't really punishing themselves, they're punishing other people.
Yeah, well, your quote, far too many Canadians saw the carbon tax for what it was: an attempt by the elites in the government, the universities, the media, and the activist class to punish lifestyles they abhor and dictate to Canadians how they should live. In other words, do what we say or pay. I thought that was so good. It's so true. Go ahead, Dad. I'm sorry.
Well, the other thing, you know, that has always bothered me is that carbon is not bad. We need carbon. This, you know, our atmosphere needs carbon. I mean, without carbon, we would not have green trees and green vegetation and bushes and all of that kind of thing, because that's what they eat. They eat carbon so that then they can let off oxygen. So it's like, why are we fighting carbon? That is not going to destroy the earth. You know, I mean, they're talking about carbon gases that are even coming from cows, for Pete's sake. I mean, it was, to me, it was like, I don't understand this. We need carbon. And so why are we saying we don't need carbon? In fact, in some of the situations, we lack carbon, and we need more carbon in order to continue to see how life goes on, because life needs that carbon.
You know, it's funny because the way that I wanted to approach this book was just to, you know, hold them by their own standards, or at least what they sold Canadians on, right? Like that was just kind of the approach I thought I would take, right? They said this, what happened? Right. And one of the examples I use is British Columbia, because British Columbia was really the epicenter of the carbon taxes, right? It was the first jurisdiction in North America to impose an economy-wide carbon tax, right? And you had the politicians at the time not only promising that carbon taxes would reduce emissions, they legislated it, right? And I mentioned this in the book, right? They legislated emissions reductions over a period of time that the carbon tax would achieve. But then you go back and use their own government data, and it shows that not only did they miss the targets, you had emissions actually going up.
Yeah.
Right. So, one of the approaches that I decided to take in the book, and perhaps other people can take other approaches, but I was just like, no, like, this is what they say. What was the outcome? Right. So not only was the carbon tax making life more expensive, not only was it an obvious tax and power grab, but it didn't work. Yeah. It also just didn't work.
Yeah. Well, carbon, I think you said carbon went up because like they wanted people to stop driving, stop heating, stop doing all this stuff. And it didn't change a thing. People still got to drive where they got to go. They still got to heat their home. And so, in fact, I think you even showed in your book, it went up. Carbon consumption went up.
That's right. Because guess what? Yeah. For so many people, countless people driving to work, heating their home, putting groceries on their family's table, that's not a nice to have. Those are all need to haves, right? And then also when you just expand the bigger picture, guess what? Making it more expensive for a family, a mom to get her kids to soccer practice, or for seniors to stay warm during winter in Canada, that does absolutely nothing to reduce emissions in places like China, India, Russia, or the United States. And by the way, as I mentioned in the book, right, the majority of countries don't have national carbon taxes.
Right.
So like, what are we doing here, folks? We make up 1.4% of global emissions, right? This is crazy.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate it. I'm sorry we weren't going to talk about your book, man, but I was so excited. I read it this weekend. It's a quick read too. I zipped right through it. It was so good. Where can people get it? Just so we cover that before we go on.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. Yeah, the best place to get this book, Axing the Tax, The Rise and Fall of Canada's Carbon Tax, is on Amazon, right? Just go on Amazon, type in Axing the Tax, The Rise and Fall of Canada's Carbon Tax. You can type in my name, Franco Terrazzano, and you should be able to get a copy there.
Awesome. Let's go on. Go ahead, Dad.
Can I ask one? This reminds me a little bit about the GST. When the GST first came on, they said it was only going to be temporary, and they were actually going to take the GST away. That someday it would be away. Well, we still have it, and now nobody's even talking about it. It's just part of our Canadian life.
What's the old saying? I believe it was Milton Friedman. It might not have been Friedman, but I think it might have been. But what did he say? There's nothing so permanent as a temporary government program, right? Like that's what a great quote. I hope it was Friedman, but whoever said it originally, there is nothing so permanent as a temporary government program. I think they nailed it.
I wanted to give you the open floor to talk about other issues that you guys are currently working on. So you can go into whatever, is salaries or CBC, whatever. I'm going to go ahead and give you the floor.
Well, I think the biggest fight and the thing that worries me the most as we look into the future and where Parliament's going is the debt. Like it's the national debt, right? The fact that the federal government in less than a decade doubled the entire national debt is outrageous. Right? Like Canadians' kids and grandkids are going to be making payments on that debt for the rest of their lives. But not only does it impact future generations, where a baby born today, she's on the hook for about $30,000 in federal government debt, but it also impacts us right now, right? Because government debt can definitely be inflationary, and it was massively inflationary during COVID, where, governments put Canadians into revolving lockdowns for the better part of 3 years, and then they cranked up the printing press to finance Ottawa's massive deficits. That is directly the inflation tax, where they print money out of thin air, and then there's too many dollars chasing too few goods. So clearly the government debt made Canadians' lives more expensive. But the second thing is, like, think about all the money we're wasting just to pay interest on the debt, right? Interest charges on the federal debt are costing us more than $1 billion every single week. Well, what does that mean? Well, $1 billion is a brand new hospital with all the bells and whistles. Okay, so we're losing out on a brand new hospital every single week just because that money is going to pay interest on the federal debt.
Yeah. Do you think, you guys are a watchdog, is there anyone that you can tell that is working to bring the debt down or fighting for that? Or are they all in on let's just keep printing money?
Well, I don't think they're all in on it to the same degree, right? Like, I don't think, I do think that there are political entrepreneurs that can sense that some Canadians want this to be reined in and they're going to jump on that. And I also just think there's probably some politicians who really believe that we have to shrink the size and cost of government and government debt, right? So I don't think they're all exactly the same. What I will say is let's just look at some of the data that we have available for us, right? Let's just look at the facts on the dash. So look, if we look at the Liberal election platform, Carney plans to add $225 billion extra to the debt over the next 4 years. Another $225 billion to the debt. Okay, over that same period, Trudeau was planning on adding about $131 billion to the debt. So the banker was supposed to be better with numbers than the drama teacher, and yet Carney is planning on adding almost $100 billion more to the debt than even Trudeau was planning to run, right? So like all of this is crazy unsustainable, right? And like, look, unless some politicians actually cut spending today, we're in for a lot of pain in the future, right? This happened in the early 90s when the debt situation got so bad that even the New Democrats in Saskatchewan were forced to close like 50 hospitals across that prairie province, right? Like this is the kind of stuff that you have to deal with today before things totally get out of control tomorrow.
Yeah. Well, Alan and I are grateful that the Canadian Taxpayers Federation is out there, that you guys got your nose in the books, in the accounting software, you know, digging through the stuff to find this stuff, because Canadians are fed up. We're absolutely tired. And I think you said it best at the beginning of the program. We're not stupid. When Carney stands up there and says we're going to give billions more to the Ukraine and their fight is our fight, why our own military is suffering, you know what I mean? And is not covered in whatever. We're not stupid. We see what they're doing. We just are so grateful for you guys. We ask that you continue to do what you're doing. And we want you to go bigger, man. I think you should be a watchdog for everything that they're doing.
I love it. I love it. Hey, can I give you one last thing on spending money overseas?
Yeah, please.
Okay, so in the last year where data is available, 2023, the federal government spent $11 billion on foreign aid. Okay, about $11 billion spending overseas. In that same year, the federal government spent about $6 billion through the entire Department of Veterans Affairs. Okay? $11 billion foreign aid, $6 billion Veterans Affairs. So the government's spending almost twice as much on foreign aid as it did through the entire Department of Veterans Affairs.
I'm sure that makes you happy, right, Dad?
No, it doesn't make me happy.
Oh, sorry for being a rain
all.
cloud.
No.
But people need to know these numbers.
Yeah.
You bet.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And we want to broadcast them for you.
Yeah.
So that people do know the numbers.
Hey, we're out of time. We appreciate you, Franco. Thank you so much. We're definitely going to have you back.
Well, hey, thank you both. Really appreciate it.
Well, it's great having Franco back. Dad, I'm telling you, he does a good job. They do a good job over there going through all the research and piecing it together just to show how this web is just, we're just being snowed. You know what I mean? Canadians are being snowed.
Yeah, it's good. I can hardly wait till I get my copy.
Yeah, I got to get the verse in, man, because I'm a little heated right now. Let's calm down. The earth and everything in it, the world and its inhabitants belong to the Lord. For he laid its foundation on the seas and established it on the river. Psalm 24, 1 and 2. Let that verse just bring us back to earth and understand that whatever happens, the lies, the deception, the manipulation, the earth and everything in it, the world and its inhabitants belong to the Lord. He's in control, right, Dad?
Right. And, I keep, and I've done this here for a while, comparing this scripture with Deuteronomy chapter 10, because when the earth and everything in it, the world and its inhabitants belong to the Lord, in Deuteronomy, the Lord also says in verse 19 of chapter 10, you are also to love the foreigner, since you were foreigners in the land of Egypt. God reminds his people that because he welcomed them, they must welcome others. And because he showed them mercy, they must show mercy to those who are outsiders, strangers, and even in need of kindness. And, you know, Jesus echoed the commandment as well. He said, I was hungry and you gave me something to eat. I was thirsty and you gave me something to drink. I was a stranger and you took me in. Matthew 25:35. So the earth belongs to the Lord and every person belongs to him as well. If we are his children, our love cannot stop at ourselves. It must flow outwardly in welcome, mercy, and compassion. And you will only learn to love like this when you're in his word daily, letting his spirit shape your heart. Today, remember, the God who owns heaven and earth has welcomed you in Christ. So love as he loves and welcome others in his name.
Wow. What made you want to write that?
Well, because when I was hitting Deuteronomy, it just kind of hit me. You know, sometimes we take a negative view of immigration, or we take a negative view of when we see somebody coming from another country. And we kind of look at it in a selfish point of view instead of looking at it in God's point of view. We have to look at the world and everything in it that, you know, as the way God looks at it and not the way we look at it. And that's what I believe this verse is happening in my life. It's opening it up in such ways that I think, you know, even getting to 2 Chronicles chapter 7, I want to compare that with this verse as well, because there's some other great things that leads to, and we need to understand it.
Well, we got like 30 seconds left. You got a new book coming out, and we're going to be showing that here shortly. But you want to give us a little taste of the new book?
Well, it's talking about living in the truth, you know, and it's gonna be a series of books. This is going to be just book 1, and I envision it to be all the way up to book 12, because I can't make them, you know, I'd love to make a bigger book, but, you know, the cost of shipping and all that kind of thing. And we want these to be free and to let people have them. So Living in the Truth is basically a book that's designed on 1 Peter chapter 1, and it goes right through verses 1 and to 3. And I know it's, you know, just 3 verses, but those verses are so packed with stuff that you and I need to know and need to incorporate in our lives. And that's why I wrote the book.
Yeah, I'm excited. It's going to be coming out here shortly. Make sure you're looking out for that. You want to help support our mission, keep this conversation and truth on the air. We are viewer supported. We don't take government funds or special interest groups. It's only because of the generosity of those who watch the show that we're able to continue. You can go to our website, gotalktruth.com, click on donate. Many different ways to give digitally that way. If you'd like to do it through the mail, you can. Many people do. You can make your gift payable to Heritage Christian Ministries Association and send it to 246 Stewart Green Southwest, Suite 3260, Calgary, Alberta, T3H 3C8. And if you'd like prayer, you can call our toll-free line, 1-800-915-0056. All right, Dad, we're out of time. We'll see you guys later.
Love you.